Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Scott Hamilton's joined us. He is on our team with Coffee with Democrats. We are just ecstatic to have him with us. He is just a wealth of knowledge. He's one of my dearest friends when it comes to Oklahoma politics, and I really appreciate him being on with us today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I'm so happy to spend some time with you.
All right. Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Democrats. We are excited today. This is a great honor for us to have Robin Fuxa with us today. She is running for Senate District, and help me out, the Senate District 21. And talk to us just a little bit about where that is at, geographically, where you're running.
Sure. So Senate District 21 is most of Stillwater. It is kind of draws a little square around most of Stillwater and then goes south to Perkins, over to Yale, Ripley, all the way to Manford. So it's a good stretch across Payne and Creek counties. But like many districts in Oklahoma, it's a little squiggly. So you just got to check the map to see if you're in this space.
Great. Well, we are so happy to have you with us. And for a little bit of housekeeping, this is going to be on Twitter Live. It's going to be on Facebook Live. It's going to be on YouTube Live. For those people who are listening to this right now, please go out, like and subscribe to this channel and share this with as many people as you can, because we want to help Robin in her endeavor to become the next senator for Senate District 21. We are located on, again, YouTube Live. It's at Coffee with Democrats 7998, all one word. And we are on Facebook Live. That's just look us up, Coffee with Democrats. We're the only ones out there. And then on Twitter Live, we are at Coffee with Dems. We ran out of room. We had to shorten it up to Coffee with Dems. So this is Coffee with Democrats. So let's find out a little bit about each other and what our favorite coffee or coffee substitute is. I mean, my whole idea around Coffee with Democrats is we would join, just like the people in the corner of the old coffee shops. You'd walk in, they're solving the world's problems, right, and they're doing it over a cup of coffee, and they're vehemently disagreeing with one another, but they walk out as friends. And that's what I wanted us to do with Coffee with Democrats. So we're going to introduce Robin and talk a little bit about what your favorite coffee or coffee substitute is.
So I start most days with just a pretty simple coffee. I used to drink my coffee black. My stomach in my 40s now doesn't allow that, so I add some milk. But just a good simple cup of coffee. But when I'm out somewhere and I can get fancy coffee, I'm going for a cappuccino. That's my drinking choice when I get my real treats. Yeah.
So Scott, talk to us a little bit about what you like to drink.
Drinking iced coffee year round for several years, and the last week or so I've been drinking hot coffee, not for any particular reason except it sounded good. And so today I did a mashup, and my first one was iced coffee followed by hot coffee, and right now I'm back to my old staple of H2O.
I start my days every day with a cup of coffee. First thing, 5:30 in the morning is when I get up every morning, and I start with a cup of coffee, and it's just straight coffee. It's McCafe brand. It's McDonald's brand, but I buy it off the street or off the shelf in the store. And I sound like some kind of drug dealer. I buy it off the street. But
I'm glad you corrected that, Kevin.
But anyway, I go to just get it from the store, and then I doctor it up. When I was 18 years old, I started working nights and weekends, and I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I did that for 43 years. And it just got to be so demanding that I had to have something that would help give me some stimulation. And I hated the taste of coffee. I still hate the taste of coffee. So I doctor it up with a lot of creamer, and I don't use sugar, but I use sweetener. sweet and low. So that's my addiction for every day when I get started. And then I transitioned to water and soda. My favorite soda, I've got one with me today, a little Coke Zero. So that is my guilty pleasure for being able to help me with I got a scratchy throat. I think you said before we got started here that Oklahoma's attacking you, and I feel your pain. I feel your pain. So let's
I'm
introduce.
sitting outside to take advantage of this beautiful weather, but
Yeah.
I'm
It
ready
is
for
gorgeous.
Mr. Bradford. I wish Mr. Bradford would come back and get all of his pear trees and take them back to that unknown place in hell where they came from.
So let's talk a little bit about Robin. And Robin, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of read from the script that I created that gives an introduction about who you are. And this is such an amazing resume for Robin that I want to share this with everybody. Robin is a fifth generation Oklahoman. I mean, that says a lot right there. She is inspired by what our state and our citizens can accomplish when we're at our best working together as neighbors. That is just such an amazing statement right there, because when Oklahoma succeeds, everybody succeeds. And when everybody succeeds, Oklahoma will go to the top of the list. Growing up in Chandler, a little more than a city block off of Route 66, she learned the values of strength, friendliness, and work ethic of Oklahoma's communities. When she was just 16 years old, her family moved to Seminole, where she was one of 28 graduates of Strother Public Schools. She spent most of her free time as a kid outside trekking through the woods, fishing at a family pond. Thank goodness for fishing. You know,
yes.
and as a person who grew up in the faith, if we're not fishing, we're fishing for men. So that's kind of my tagline. At the lake, playing water games and with her sisters and cousins and grandparents, she even did a little hunting when she was younger, but fishing is still one of her favorite ways to spend the day. Her parents placed a high priority on education, ensuring that her three sisters and her had the opportunity to attend a fantastic Oklahoma public school and pursue whatever career paths they felt they wanted to do. After graduating from OSU, she taught fifth graders at Bartlesville for a year. She returned to Stillwater, where she married her husband, Barry, in 2001. And she is grateful to have had the opportunity to teach in Pawnee for most of her public school teaching career. She earned her master's degree in literacy and library media in 2004. She absolutely loves serving as a school library media specialist, supporting students, learning interests, and fostering the love of reading. But in 2006, she returned to the graduate school one more time because she wanted to effect a wider change in education. She has been at the University of Oklahoma State University for the last 15 years, most recently as a literary education faculty, where she's had the honor to prepare teachers to serve across the state until January 2024, just 2 months ago, when she left the university to pursue the opportunity to serve in Senate District 21 as a senator. She has consistently advocated for our public schools as spaces where we come together across communities to meet our children's needs, nurture their dreams, and work with the intent to offer every child a sense of belonging. Public schools are the bedrock of our democracy and are vital to the thriving community and economy. While there is still work to be done, public schools remain the best to offer our children best space to offer our children access to the American dream. So, Robin, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with Coffee with Democrats your story. And we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. And I don't expect for us to actually get all the information that we want to have from you, but we are going to dive into this, pretty as close as we can to gaining as much information as the average person wants to know about who Robin is, what her policies are, and what her intentions are when she becomes our next senator. So we're going to kind of bounce around here a little bit, but talk to us a little bit about your upbringing And beyond what we just talked about with your the write-up that I created here that came off of your website.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be with you both today. So I just had such incredible learning experiences as a public school kiddo. And my eighth grade English teacher was Anna Myers, who's written several children's and young adult books. And I just learned the power of what a teacher can do for a student. We had such rich conversations about the world and what it means to be engaged in it, who we wanted to be in the world, and how we thought about the big issues of our time. And we were eighth graders having these incredible conversations. And so I was like, I want to do that. I want to foster those conversations around books and current events and all of those things. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then fast forward to my teaching career, one of the things that that struck me is that I saw our funding just whittled away over time, slowly at first, and then very, very quickly, a huge hit after the recession in 2008. We saw 28% cuts to funding. And so the agony of watching that and writing reference letter after reference letter after reference letter for our graduates who were leaving the state. I only somewhat joke that you could see the teachers going to Texas from space. It was so rampant. We had such a terrible teacher exodus, and it was painful to watch. So that was really hard for me because I wanted them to stay, but I also wanted them to go where they could thrive and be taken good care of. So that is certainly one of the things that sparked my passion for advocacy work. And then just working with my colleagues at the Oklahoma Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, we spent a lot of time at the Capitol trying to make the case for a quality prepared teacher in every classroom. And what I realized is that we needed more folks there who could make the vote, that we were making our case well, but we needed more people who were genuinely supportive. So that's kind of one of the things that led me to do the advocacy work. But backing up to tell you a little bit more about my life, I had such a lovely family. I have such a lovely family throughout my life, and I feel that strong support in everything I've done. And so I'm really grateful for that. My folks really instilled that you have to show up when there's a need. So I watched them show up with casseroles, when somebody was ill. My dad is an electrician, and so he would show up to help with jobs when folks couldn't cover those, or to do carpentry work for people. He literally helped build our church when I was a kid. And so that is one of my inspirations for serving. I think that's just such an essential part of being in a community. So I'm really grateful that my parents modeled that. And I hope to continue modeling that for my two amazing kids. I have an 18-year-old looking at colleges right now, Emory, who I'm so proud of. Barry and I are so thrilled about the choices that Emory's looking at. She wants to be a band director. And so we're excited that we're looking at education for a pathway for Emory too. And then Carver is our 10-year-old who's a fourth grader here in Stillwater Public Schools as well. And so we're just really proud of the family we've made, and we want to make sure our schools are protected for their well-being and for the whole community. Because as you mentioned in the bio, I really do view our public schools as the bedrock of democracy and the way that we offer opportunity to kids. So that's one of my primary goals, is to protect and support our schools, and they're very much under attack. Not even just a little bit. We have billionaires funneling money into Ryan Walters' campaign war chest so that he can work to privatize, and so that the folks around him, many of whom are in our legislature, can work to privatize. We saw the voucher bill go through, and we know that's very problematic for draining funds, and that effort's not going to stop. That's why we see all this misinformation coming out about our schools, because they're trying to undermine the trust that has folks supporting public schools.
Certainly. We're seeing the same thing in other states. And I think a few years ago, Arizona started doing the same thing. And we're hearing information from Arizona now about how detrimental the voucher schemes are, and how it's going to start impacting not only the schools themselves, but the thing that most communities really fall back on is, and again, in Oklahoma is the same way. The school is the largest employer of the community. And when
Yes.
you take that and you break that apart, and then you have that community that's going to start dying. There's extracurricular activity that goes on, their football, their basketball, their baseball, their softball,
Mhm.
the swimming, everything that the students have that are offered by public schools, they're not going to have that available in all of the privatized schools that are out there. And then they're not going to be given opportunity because the private schools are going to say, we're only going to take the best. We're not interested in somebody that is just trying to improve themselves. And we're going to see a real crisis, which is on my list of question to ask you, is really one of the things to really talk about and let you talk more about. And you actually touched upon, seeing the teacher crisis in 2008, 2009, when people were leaving. But let's talk about our current public teacher crisis. And we're going through kind of the same thing. I mean, literally, to use your words, you could literally look from space and see the exodus of teachers leaving Oklahoma. I mean, it's like a caravan going to outside of Oklahoma to some other place.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of folks aren't aware of, that people saw the walkout happen. There was this groundswell of support in 2018. And then we didn't get all of the funding that we'd asked for, didn't follow. We did get some substantive teacher raises, but other states who are competing for educators were doing the same thing, right?
Right.
And the other piece that folks don't realize is that our regional funding we're still the lowest in P-12 funding, public school funding in our region. It's $1,786 per child per year, which comes out to, I think it's like 11.25 million per year that we'd have to raise Stillwater Public Schools funding, for example, to get to that regional parity. So we're not talking about small potatoes here. That's a huge chunk of money that our schools are doing without, that our our neighboring states have invested in their schools. And that's what provides that support that can help teachers have a more well-being in the classroom, those smaller class sizes. It can offer them, the district, a chance to recruit more special ed teachers that we need, more therapists, more counselors, all that wraparound support we need for kid and educator well-being, really, at the end of the day. Because when kids are doing better, teachers are doing better. There's that secondary teacher trauma that can hit when you have, we have many children with really high ACE scores. Oklahoma has one of the highest adverse childhood experience rates in the nation. And so we have to take care of our teachers because they're supporting the well-being of our kiddos. So we've got that support, and we have to still address teacher pay. That's the elephant in the room people don't like to talk about. But when we talk to young folks about why they want to enter the profession or why they don't, pay is the thing that they say. And we, that's part of the world we live in. We have to compensate people for the level of work they're doing. And teaching is a demanding career. It's an incredibly rewarding and rich career, but it's demanding. And so we need to compensate people for the work they're prepared to do.
And that's such a sad commentary for where, we were in the the early 20s. I say the early 2000s, we were ranked number 15 in the nation. And we've fallen all the way to either 49th or 50th when it comes to the entire nation, when it comes to outcomes for our students. So,
Robin,
Scott,
I want to follow up with Robin on the amount that you mentioned a moment ago, because that's a lot of money. But at the same time, when we look at how much money the state has spent and is now preparing to spend much more on privatizing education,
Exactly.
how are we ever going to hit this balance?
Well, I don't believe, for many of the folks who support that privatization effort, I don't think the goal is to hit the balance. I think there are folks like Ryan Walters whose overt goal is to drain funding from our public schools so that many of them have to close because there's profit to be made if we have to pay for our children's primary and secondary education. So I think there is a sect who are actively working to end public school as we know it. And I don't think we can ignore that fact. And even for those who thought that the voucher program might give an opportunity to kiddos moving to private school. We're not seeing that happen. It simply doesn't typically occur because the private schools are designed to serve about the population they're currently serving. They can and often are very selective, not always, but often. And tuition in many of those schools went up by, you guessed it, the $7,500 that many families were getting for that voucher. And so we sometimes see an offset of that tuition going up. So, and then there's the fact that over about 55% of the families who applied for that voucher make over $150,000 per year. So we're not talking about helping families in need here. We're talking about padding the budgets of families who were already able to afford private school for their children in most cases. So I think that's an important thing to emphasize, that we have to support the schools we have that are publicly funded, with public dollars, guaranteed by our state constitution. We have an obligation to do that as a state. And until we can do that and have all of the resources we need to serve our kids in public schools, there shouldn't be a single dollar going the other way. And more importantly, because it is public money, it should stay there regardless. There's never been a time in Oklahoma history that we talk about looking back at the 2008 funding levels. But it's important to remember schools were not flush with cash in 2008. Okay. And so they've always kind of been scrapping through, doing the best they can with minimal funding, and our teachers do yeoman's work. But we should work toward a time when our schools are in fabulous shape, both physically and in terms of the teacher workforce. Class sizes are small. And in fact, the folks who do tout the benefits of private schools, that's usually what they're talking about, is that they have nice small classes. We could do that in public schools too, if we funded them adequately.
And we're talking about
a very compelling argument there. And this is going to be a very pointed question, because we've already talked about the issues of teacher salaries, of classroom sizes, privatization. If you could name one of the biggest areas of impact right now for our school children and our teachers, what would that be, Robin? What is the one thing that we should all get behind and focus on to really make a positive impact in the classroom?
I think the answer to that depends on where our focus is. I would say the two words that would probably come out of most folks' mouths right now would be Ryan Walters. And I do think he absolutely must be impeached. His rhetoric is divisive and dangerous. And he's clearly not doing the work he was charged with doing. So I would adamantly call for folks to rally around the need for his impeachment. But I think we also have to remember he's a cog in a much larger machine. And so what I would urge along with that is making sure that we look at every single local and state level election, and certainly looking at the federal level too. But I think it's the local and state elections that are all too often not focused on heavily enough, and make sure that every space we support folks who are going to support our public schools at the school board level, at the city council level. There's some space to advocate there, certainly. But especially in those state, Senate, and House roles who oversee funding and oversight of offices like Ryan Walters, because he's very much overstepped the bounds of his work. He is not respecting local control is kind of the understatement of the century. So that's something we have to wrangle in, but we also have to work to educate the public about how critical it is to genuinely support our public schools, both in our rhetoric and our policy, making sure our teachers have the freedom to teach and do the work they know how to do well. They're prepared professionals. They deserve that respect. And they certainly don't deserve the nasty rhetoric that's coming from the state superintendent and many of our legislators. Again, the reason for those attacks is to undermine faith, and they're manufactured by the Manhattan Institute, which doesn't sound very Oklahoma to me. Chris Rufo is pretty overt about his effort to undermine faith in schools. It's strategy, and Walters touts those points over and over again. Those are the loops we hear him on. Whatever the Manhattan Institute and a few other think tanks are throwing out, he's laying them down. But they have nothing to do with what's happening in Oklahoma public schools. And that's what we have to keep focusing on, that they're doing incredible work with minimal resources. Just think what they could do if we adequately funded them and had a prepared caring teacher in every single classroom. We have over 4,600 emergency certified teachers in our state right now, a new record this year, and we keep breaking that record annually. We need a prepared teacher in every classroom. An emergency cert teacher has a bachelor's degree, but they're not required to have any preparation in the content area, any background in that. So I could show up and say, I'm here to teach trigonometry, even if I didn't have an education degree, any background in the subject, and I could in theory teach that. And in many cases, the district has no one else to hire. So they're caught in this difficult space. But then we also have adjuncts who do not have a degree. I spoke with a human resources colleague who was working to hire the fourth finger was under the screen, 4 foreign language teachers, and they had to hire one emergency cert. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that the 3 others were adjuncts, one of whom graduated from high school the preceding year. And they'd worked all summer to make those hires, and that was the best option they had available to them. So we're talking about folks who don't have a bachelor's teaching our children. And while I appreciate folks stepping up to try to do this work, we owe our children a prepared teacher in every single classroom. This is difficult work, even for those of us who know it well, because I always kind of joke that no, I didn't become a rocket scientist. I wanted complex work. I decided to teach,
Right.
because rocket fuel is a lot more predictable than children. So, and learning is very complex. It's exciting and rewarding, but it takes somebody who knows that work.
That was a pointed question, and I'm not sorry I asked it, because you gave us the best response. You have the background, the education, and the experience as a professional educator to talk to someone like me who is not. But I get exactly what you're saying, and that's exciting to me, that you could have a conversation with an ordinary Oklahoman about how dire the situation is. So nice job there.
Well, thank you. I think we can all unite around the fact that we know what the need is. We just have to make sure our policymakers are accountable for offering that to our kiddos.
So when we were looking at your background, looking at your website, and some of the things that you highlighted on there was, one of them was the healthcare crisis that we have in Oklahoma. And I want to talk more about education, but I think we need to give you more opportunity to talk about other things, because you have a broad base, a very wide background of information, with all of your college degree work, undergraduate and also your graduate work, that really gives you a very you have more than the fundamentals, you have more than the basics of the average person and the qualifications. So let's talk about healthcare and the healthcare crisis in Oklahoma, and what some of the things that you think we should be looking at to try to curb or correct those.
Well, we are still one of the highest uninsured rates in the country in Oklahoma, and that's alarming. And it's something that should concern us all. And we know that Oklahomans support expanding that access to care, because we brought in Medicaid despite the legislature, right? Or excuse me, we brought in that expansion despite the legislature's efforts to block that. So, and while there's been a little bit of mucking with that system too, that's problematic. It did offer a lot of our neighbors the care that they need and access to that affordably. So that was a big step, but we still have a big number of people who need that access to care. So that's something I'm very invested in, making sure that people have the insurance coverage to make the choices for their well-being right now. Instead of putting that off, they end up costing themselves more. But more importantly, folks can put their lives in jeopardy really easily when they are worried about whether or not that bill is going to replace their groceries that month or their rent that month or whatever the need might be. So we have an obligation to make sure that folks have the health coverage to take care of themselves in the immediate before something becomes crisis level. And I've watched as families have had those difficult decisions. As a teacher, you kind of have that window into people's lives, and it's heartbreaking and it's not necessary. We can fix that, and we have to. The other piece I would say that's really critical in healthcare for me is one of the other areas I should say is making sure we recruit professionals to go into our healthcare fields from within Oklahoma. I think incentive programs are great and that we need to continue with those, but we also see that there's a churn in many cases when people come in for a few years and get those loans paid off or whatever the effort might be, and then they go back to wherever they're from. We've got to invest in Oklahomans. We have folks who can do that work, and we can grow our surgeons and our specialists and at every level of care. We need more of them. There is, and we're seeing more of an exodus, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. We're seeing some of that in healthcare too. But from the certified nurse's aide, which is work I did really briefly, and I have all the admiration in the world for folks who do that long term, we need to take care of them so that they can offer people the dignity of care and stay in that work or move up into other parts of the healthcare field, all the way up to that more advanced specialist, because Oklahomans deserve that. We need that here at home. We shouldn't have people having to go out of state for the care they need or travel really great distances. We have incredible maternity care deserts as well. So there's just so much work to do to fill the need. And that's absolutely essential. And we're being counterproductive in many cases rather than solving our problems with some of these really restrictive, especially for women's health. With some of these restrictive measures, a doctor shouldn't be in a position of having to fear about their own criminal liability when advising somebody about their health. They shouldn't have to say, there's not a red alarm that goes off when a woman's life is in danger. And so to put a doctor, an OBGYN in that position of worrying whether they should provide care to a woman is immoral and it's unacceptable. And so that's something we need to address too.
And we just saw that an article came out, I believe it was yesterday, that Oklahoma is in top 10 states of the most stressed out of all the citizens, within the state are stressed out. And that's alarming too, because that goes back to what you were talking about with our mental health crisis in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It goes hand in hand with our homeless crisis. Yes. When you go into Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County, and even the surrounding counties around that, we've got a very large homeless population that is either affected by mental illness, drug abuse. There's other factors too that are involved in homelessness as well, but it's a crisis that has to be looked at from all different levels. And I appreciate you talking about that. So the next thing we need to talk about is, and we're going to be running short on time when we get through with this topic, so we're going to move along here, but we really got to talk about one of the main bellwether election is going to have the biggest impact on elections throughout the United States and even in Oklahoma is women's rights and bodily autonomy. We just, in the last few minutes, we just got word that France has codified abortion within their constitution. And they did it because of what the United States did in taking women's rights away from, in particular, the rights of bodily autonomy. So they have provided, and again, I don't have all the fine details in what that means, but they have codified abortion in France, in which we should have done ourselves. We should have been the number one nation to actually provide liberties and freedoms to our women first and foremost. And yet we're falling behind. And because we are taking those rights away from women, France decided they wanted to be the first in the world to do that. So let's talk about your vision on women's rights and bodily autonomy and how that impacts your campaign, as well as the campaign of those people that are also running against you, which we're not going to name.
Sure. So I understand this is an emotionally and often in many cases for folks a religiously complex topic. I grew up Catholic. But the thing for me is I don't know a single woman who's made that decision lightly. Right. It's oftentimes a health concern. Those are very complicated and difficult decisions that folks are making. And It is fascinating to me that we have leaders who love to talk about small government, but they want to make decisions for women in the doctor's office. It's so disrespectful, it's so dehumanizing, and it's actively harmful both for health and the well-being of women more broadly. And again, we have that exodus of health professionals. OBGYNs are leaving the state in droves. And everyone needs access to good maternity and gynecological care as well.
Sure.
And those are the same professionals doing that work. And so we're seeing an exodus of those professionals because they don't want to be in that position of being targeted and having to worry about how they advise a patient about their health because of these very draconian laws we're putting in place. We're also seeing things like birth control being put on the table. They're going after no-fault divorce, for heaven's sake. So just a complete lack of respect for women and our ability to make decisions for ourselves across the board.
Right.
Is because in most cases, no-fault divorce allows people to leave sometimes an abusive marriage when they need to without having to wade into all of that territory. So women are just under attack in Oklahoma, and it has to stop. We have to be able to let folks make the care decisions for themselves and consult with their family, with their doctor. But that's not anyone else's decision to make. Period.
In with the women's rights issues that we're talking about, one of the things that we're seeing an increase peripherally, we think this is just the beginning of the statistic, is morbidity with maternity.
Yes.
Women who are unable to receive the care that they need during those stages of pregnancy, that it's costing the woman their life because of that desert that you're talking about earlier. So can you expound on that just a little bit too, and talk a little bit more about some of the things that you think that we should be looking at to improve women's lives rather than taking those rights away from women?
Sure. So with that immediate medical emergency that you're talking about, we've put our doctors in a position of not being able to do the work in the way that they know they should. And so they're in this, am I going to be in legal jeopardy or am I going to be in ethical jeopardy? And we should never put professionals in that kind of position. But we see women who have, there have been women who lost their lives because they have that decision doesn't get made quickly enough. And then sometimes when we know we've hit a crisis level, it's past the point of no return. And it's heartbreaking. It's, I don't even have words for it. It's disrespect doesn't begin to cover it. We have to value the women in our lives, many of whom are already parents. We talk about this care for children. Many of those women are already parents as well. And so more importantly, they're a human being with dignity and whom we need to respect. So that's shocking that we're in this space right now. And it's something we have to correct to improve women's lives. Oh my goodness. So many things. We need to address food security. Many of our food insecure families are single moms. Or single women who are just working to navigate the world. So we've got to address food insecurity. We've got to deal with our housing crisis that you mentioned earlier. Many folks find themselves unhoused. We imprison more women than hardly any space on the planet. And while we had some good efforts to try to curtail that, we're seeing an uptick again. And so we have to take care of women when they've been justice involved and make sure we have a pathway to well-being from there. But more importantly, we need to not put people in prison for, there's a bill, I think it's 1470, but don't quote me on that. The survivors justice effort that the Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice is working on, where a woman was defending herself from a domestic violence situation. She was under attack, and unfortunately, her partner died in that situation, but she was thrown in prison. We should have been caring for her. And so those kinds of things are just one of the many signs of our lack of respect for women and their autonomy and their well-being. The same folks who yell about stand your ground laws will throw a woman in prison for defending herself in a crisis moment. And so we've got to take good care of women. We've got to make sure that we look at overall well-being, strong public schools, childcare. Folks can't get to work because we have such an incredible childcare crisis. It's way too expensive. It's difficult to access. We've got to get some work done around that.
So
there's a long list.
You started talking about families when we were dealing with education, particularly children.
Mm-hmm.
And now talking about women. I can't help but draw a straight line. When we support women, we support Oklahoma families.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I mean, that is so clear from what you just stated, that is your goal. And you said many of them are mothers. Well, we've also got women legislators, and if it means that women have to take this one and make it their priority, then I'm all behind that.
Yeah, so we absolutely have to make better inroads across professions for women. I would say too, along with that, with our education conversation we had a little bit ago, I think that is a factor in how the profession is perceived and the respect around it. We saw a drop in pay when women entered the workforce in teaching in the late 1800s. The pay plummeted, and we're still working to correct that. So
we're going to have to be wrapping this up pretty soon. You've got a hard quit here in just a few minutes, so we want to respect your time and honor that as well. But for those people who were not able to be at your kickoff just a few days ago, you had a great kickoff. It was like a sellout crowd, a Super Bowl moment. It had been a great feeling for you.
It was really fun.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what you talked to those folks during your kickoff meeting? What was your, what was that conversation like, or what was that speech like that you gave? Can you kind of rehash a little bit of that so that we can share that on Coffee with Democrats with people who want to follow you?
Oh goodness, I don't know if I could recreate it, but I'll try to give a brief mini summary. I started talking about, I grew up riding my bike around the neighborhood, kind of oblivious like we all are during that early childhood stage. But I did watch my folks show up for people. And so that was such an inspiration. And then my incredible public schools that I had, both at Chandler and at Strother, I had amazing teachers in both those places. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. And it was really difficult. I've been in teacher education for 15 years after teaching in Bartlesville and then in Pawnee for several years. But it's so much fun to prepare educators to go out and do this work because it is such a joy to see not just how they experience school, but then looking at how they work with kiddos. That's such a nice ripple effect to watch. But I felt compelled to step away because I've seen education just be bludgeoned in recent years, and we have to protect that. That is the center of our community. That's one of the last spaces where people come together across difference to learn from and work with one another for the betterment of the community, for their own learning, for everything that's good about the world. There's something magical that happens in a classroom where they build that community, they get to know each other, they can respect across differences, they can have those difficult conversations about life. And so we need to keep nurturing that space, both fiscally and in the support we show for our schools and the teachers who serve in them. So that's a huge passion for me. I want to keep working on that. And then I'm certainly committed to making sure folks have the health care they need, both in terms of the insurance that they might need, and then that we have the professionals to care for them. We have a lot of rural hospitals closing, and we still need to shore that up. And then we've got to have the professionals to work in those. We can't have empty buildings. That doesn't help folks very well. So we've got to recruit those professionals from within Oklahoma to serve in our communities. And then economically, we have to support our small businesses, and we have to do the real work to get our house in order to bring businesses into the state. We can dangle all the tax money in front of Panasonic that we like, but until we have our house in order, until they see that our public schools are funded and supported well, until they see that we have access to health care, until they see that we're going to let our economy thrive, because really, investing in public ed is investing in our economy. That's where our workforce comes from. That's where we see people who are interested in these STEM fields that a lot of our officials claim they're working to foster. But if you don't have prepared science teachers, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to have as many people interested in science. We're going to have to invest in our teacher workforce, and that will help us with all of our other workforce needs. And then we'll see employers say, okay, Oklahoma might be the place for us. We do have a low cost of living, but that's not going to make up for the experience people have. And then the other piece along with that is we need to make sure we're welcoming in our policy. We've seen cruel legislation
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
problematic for LGBT folks, that's problematic for women, that's problematic in so many ways towards so many of our communities. And we're not going to recruit people to come to our state when our policy is not just problematic, but it's cruel. So we need folks who are looking at Oklahoma to know they'll be safe and welcome here. That's really important.
So I'm going to try something here real quick. I'm going to try to share on the screen how people can support you through the Act Blue. It's not going to show up, so I apologize that I didn't get that to show up on the screen.
That's okay.
I don't know whether you can do that, Scott, or not, if you have that capability, but in the meantime, I will tell people how to do that. It's going to be very easy. To support Robin, please go to secure.actblue.com/donate/FUXA, Fuxa. And I've got to thank you so much for coming on Coffee with Democrats and sharing your time and your vision on what you want to do to help the people of Oklahoma as a new senator for Senate District 21. And I'm going to take just a little bit of artistic license with your last name. And I love Ted Lasso. I've spent so much time. I'm on my third time watching it, and we just finished it last night. And one of my favorite characters on Ted Lasso is Danny Rojas. And every single time he would come out, I thought of you because he kept his pronunciation was football for life. You know, he's just so beautiful as an actor, and his character, you know, football for life. And I'm going to take a little bit of artistic license and say the phrase Fuxa for life, because that really is the way I feel about having you on with Coffee with Democrats and what your vision is for Oklahomans. And again, it is Fuxa for life. So we really,
I'll take that.
We are really pleased with that. And I will make sure that we have that Act Blue. It will be on the screen. As a matter of fact, we're going to put it up right now. You're going to see it show up on the screen right now. So thank you so much for being on Coffee with Democrats. You are a gem, and we cannot let this diamond get away from us. We've got to support Robin and everything that she's doing. We got to get out and support her on the ground. We need drivers to help take people door to door. We've got to have people that are willing to make text message calls, phone banking. We've got to be able to have people going door to door within Senate District 21 and knocking on the doors to tell people we've got a great person here that is absolutely wonderful, that will help people rather than try to tear people down. And that's one of the great messages that we have to share. So thanks so much for coming on Coffee with Democrats. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you for any last words that you have.
Thank you, Robin. This has been one of the most energizing conversations that I've had in a while. I am so excited about your campaign, And I want to acknowledge that this is not just you, this is your family, and you are sacrificing, your whole family is sacrificing for you to do this. But given the points that you raised today, while I'm not in your Senate district and I can't vote for you, I can certainly support you and encourage other people to do the same, because you are exactly the kind of Democrat that Oklahoma needs to chart a new way for us. And the things that you're talking about are not pie in the sky. They're realistic solutions to real problems. So it has been just a real joy. And I'm looking forward to talking with you again before the election.
Thank you both so much. I'm glad to be with you.
Yes, thank you. And for everybody, we will be on next week. I think we've got a very good candidate coming in from Georgia that we're going to be able to talk to next week. So please stay tuned for that conversation. We're going to be putting that one out. The information on that one, I'm kind of having to hold back on who it is, but it's somebody that I think we're going to be very interested in supporting, and particularly who she's campaigning against. So please bear with us as we move on to next week's conversation. Thank you so much for being on Coffee with Democrats. Robin, you are just a joy, and we really look forward to everything that we can to support you. And for everybody, please join us next week again on Coffee with Democrats for our next conversation. And until then, please be safe.